What is going on, guys? Deimos here, long time no see. Hello, how are all of you doing? I hope you're doing well, and welcome back to the channel. We're gonna pretend like it hasn't been 8 months since my last real upload, but I have been loving New World. I have close to 500 hours on the game currently, so I'm not kidding around when I say that. And in that time, I've noticed coming across information about the game is a little difficult. A lot of the wikis, guides, and posts really scratch the surface or only cover meta topics such as XP gain, mining routes, and skill leveling strats. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with that and that information is needed, there's plenty of useful information that really isn't easy to find, and that's what I want to focus on. Of course, I'll cover all topics New World, but I want to help the players who want to know the more specific details. Details like the ones we're going to cover today, and that is the boss affixes, what they mean, and why they matter. Now, if you don't know what an affix is, like me until about a few hours ago, it's basically the buffs of the boss that appear under their name. Shattering, Slicers, and Cold Aura are all affixes. Today, we're going to be going over all of them, what they mean, and why they're important. Now, like I said before, information on New World is kind of hard to come across, so there's going to be a few of these where I'm a little speculative about their effects, but I do feel like what I've settled on makes the most sense. And without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to start with what I would consider elemental buffs, and I'm starting with these because they're the ones I'm the most uncertain about. However, I think all of these count as elemental damage, and depending on your elemental resistance are going to depend how much they affect you. We have Ignited, which is 50% of outgoing damage is converted to fire damage. Abyssal, 50% of outgoing damage is converted to void damage. Electrified, 50% of outgoing damage is converted to lightning damage. Arcane, 50% of outgoing damage is converted to arcane damage. Arboreal, 50% of outgoing damage is converted to nature damage. And Frozen, which is 50% of outgoing damage is converted to ice damage. Now these are the damage buffs, and I imagine half the damage is going to be physical and the other half is elemental instead of all physical or all elemental. Next are the elemental resistances. We have Fire Resistant, which is 75% resistant to incoming fire damage. Void, which is 75% resistance to incoming void damage. Lightning Resistant, which is 75% resistance to incoming lightning damage. Arcane Resistant, which is 75% resistance to incoming arcane damage. Nature Resistant, which is 75% resistance to incoming nature damage. And Ice Resistant, 75% resistance to incoming ice damage. Now, these are more obvious in terms of how they work, but I'm going to give it a quick breakdown. So if you basically have a weapon with half nature damage and half thrust, for example, you're going to be much less deadly to an enemy with nature resistance. And to add a note, someone in the forum thread I was reading asked, for example, a fire resistant enemy is more vulnerable to ice damage, and the dev responded with this. No, there is no correlation between ice resistance affix and the weakness to fire damage. However, some creatures are naturally weak to fire damage, though that is unrelated to the affix system. Now, enemy natural weaknesses is something I will be covering in a later video, but just to be clear, there is no damage correlation between the resistances outside of the enemy taking less damage from that element. Moving on to the more general buffs that enemies have, we have Brutal, which is 25% increase to all outgoing damage, Shattering, which is 50% increase to all outgoing stamina damage, Hardy, which is 50% increase to base health, and Armored, which is 20% increase to physical armor. Now, these are all pretty self-explanatory except for the Shattering one, so I'm going to quickly explain that. When you block, the enemies do stamina damage, draining some stamina from you on each hit. Shattering enemies will just do 50% more, so if you're a tank, just expect these guys to maybe knock your blocks down a little bit faster. And now for all of our favorite affixes, the ones that get all of us killed. We have Cold Aura, which is a persistent aura that slows within a 5-meter radius. Explosive, everyone's favorite, the creature will explode on death, dealing fire damage in a 5-meter radius. Slimy, which leaves a trail of AoE pools when moving that apply slow. Slicer, everyone's other favorite, casts a rotating beam near their position every 5 seconds. The beam deals small amounts of void damage when touched. Corruption Explosive, the creature will explode on death, dealing corruption damage in a 5-meter radius. I don't think I've ever seen this one. Defiled, drops a pool of corruption upon death, applying 10 corruption per second in a 4-meter radius for 7 seconds, so that's kind of a big one. Phalanx casts a large protective shield around the character which will block incoming player projectiles. This shield pulses on and off every 5 seconds. Now, I don't think I've actually ever seen the Corruption Explosion, but if you have, please leave a comment because I'm very curious about this one. So I know some of these are a little bit self-explanatory, but others are a little bit less obvious, so I figured I'd cover all of them in this one video and kind of make a bit of a definitive guide. Below I'll link the thread where I found all this information, and there was legitimately only one place where I could find it, so I'm just going to take it all as canon, and the dev said it, so that backs it up as well. If there's any affixes that you didn't see on this list but you have seen in game, please let me know. Make sure to like, sub, and let me know down below if you guys have anything you'd like to know about the game that I could cover in a later video. Have a great day, adventurers, and I'll see you all in the next one.